Bear with me, folks, as today was my first attempt at hot chocolate bombs. You need a silicone mat. Heart-shaped one is the only one I had in the house. 2 different size spoons. I use a teaspoon and a demi-tasse spoon. About half a cup of mini marshmallows. 1 tablespoon each of hot cocoa mix. And some sprinkles and some semi-sweet chocolate. You also need a knife, a cutting board, and a bowl to go on top of a pot of water for a double boiler. The first thing I'm going to do is take my 4-ounce block of chocolate and I'm actually going to shave it really fine with my knife. You can do this with a peeler, but it would take a little bit longer and the heat of your hands would really melt the chocolate. So we suggest that you use a knife. And basically I'm holding the block of the chocolate, carefully making thin slices. This does take a little bit of time, but it is worth the effort. You could use chocolate melts instead of using a bar or a block of chocolate, but the flavor from the chocolate melts is not as good as the flavor of the chocolate from a chocolate bar. You're better off because the chocolate melts have a waxy taste to them, and so they taste a little bit funny. So we are going to temper this chocolate. You can do this in a microwave, but not everyone has a microwave, so I figured I was going to do it on the stove. If you do this in the microwave, you are going to cook it for 30 seconds, then you're going to stir it, and then you will heat it for 15-second increments, taking it out, stirring it until it is melted. You don't want it completely melted because we do not want the temperature to go above 90 degrees. So on your last round, there could be some little shavings of chocolate still whole that when you mix it, they will melt. So now I'm going to take this bowl of finely shaved chocolate over to my almost boiling pot of water. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the heat off of this pot when I see little bubbles forming on the bottom because I'm not actually looking for a boil. I'm going to keep this on top of the stove and stir it as it melts. We are tempering this chocolate, and when you temper this chocolate, you're melting it only to the temperature of about 90 degrees. The reason it's 90 degrees because after 90 degrees, the crystal structures of the cocoa butter actually changes. And if you would put it into your mold at that temperature, it would not set correctly and it would almost be pliable instead of hard and have a nice crack when you snap the chocolate. So I've melted my chocolate and it's actually slightly above 90 degrees. So what I want to do is I'm going to actually add a little bit more chocolate shavings to this. And what this is going to do is it's going to help bring back the crystal structure of the cocoa butter because this whole chocolate still has their crystals intact. So it will help the other chocolate that's already melted come back together. So I'm going to keep stirring it, and you can keep adding more chocolate as you are trying to bring the temperature down. I probably used 5 ounces of chocolate all together between the first melting and the added shavings. If I didn't go above that 90 degrees, I would not add any more chocolate. 4 ounces is more than enough. I am constantly checking the temperature of my chocolate. I actually have like an infrared thermometer, but you can use a candy thermometer if you have one, or a regular thermometer. We're just looking for the temperature of the chocolate. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this chocolate in the molds. I'm going to take about a tablespoon and put it into the bottom of the mold. And I'm going to work with these one at a time because once they go into the mold, they actually start to set up rather quickly. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the chocolate and I'm basically coating the sides of the mold. I'm taking time and I'm paying attention to the sides because the sides are going to hold the structure of the chocolate bomb. You want to make sure that your layers are as even as possible. And if you feel that you do not have enough chocolate after about 1 tablespoon, you can add a little bit more and adjust. I like to kind of knock it on the table just to make sure that the surface is flat on the bottom and there are no bubbles involved. At this point, I'm going to put them in the refrigerator to harden for about 5 minutes. Then I'm going to take them out of the refrigerator and I'm actually going to recoat all of the sides of the molds. Okay, I really want to make sure that the sides are strong because that is what's really supporting the structure of the hot cocoa bomb. Your chocolate should not have hardened at any point here, so you can continue to work with it. You do not really want to reheat it because if you do that, you will change the temperature of the chocolate temper. I decided to use a small paintbrush here for this step because I felt like it was better to get the details of the molds rather than the spoon because I'm able to coat the sides better with the small brush. You can really use any kind of brush that you want as long as it's not been used for another purpose. I'm now going to put them in the refrigerator for 5 minutes until they completely harden, and now I can unmold them. So just be careful when you unmold them because you don't want to crack them during this process. What's great about the silicone molds is that they easily pop right out of the mold without getting damaged. You can see that I did not do a perfect job. There are some imperfections as this was my first time, but I'm going to go with it anyway. So now I'm going to fill my chocolate molds and I'm going to show you 2 different ways that I used in order to close them. And one I found looked nicer and one I found was easier to do. You're going to be the judge of which way you prefer to do it. I'm going to place them back on top of the molds on the opposite side because I didn't really want to rest them on my counter because it does have a warm spot because there is a refrigerator underneath this counter. So for the first one, I filled it with 1 tablespoon of hot chocolate. And then I added my marshmallows. You could add marshmallows, you could add sprinkles, you could add nuts, you can add whatever you want inside. Chocolate syrup, caramel syrup, whatever you like. But do not fill it up too much because then you're not going to be able to close it. Now I took a little melted chocolate and I actually went all the way around the rim of the heart or of the mold and put the melted chocolate on there, and it's going to act like a glue. Just make sure that you get every little piece of the edges. Now I can place one of the other molds on top, and that will seal my chocolate bomb if I give it a couple of seconds. You can actually go in and you can pipe a little bit of extra chocolate all the way around the edges, and we're actually going to cover that seam up with some sprinkles. Now if you had a large bowl of sprinkles, you can actually just dip them into the large bowl, but I only had a small amount of sprinkles of the color that I liked. So I'm actually going to pour them on top. Not as perfect, but it's what I was able to do. So we're going to do this all the way around. And if you want to add some more chocolate around the edges, you can do so just to fill in any gaps. The sprinkles will cover up any imperfections. And this is what my first chocolate bomb looks like. It came out all right, I guess. The second way is that I'm going to take a small pan and I'm going to heat it up slightly. And I'm going to take one of the molds, and I'm just going to kind of swirl it around the bottom of the pan. And what that does is it evens out the sides and it heats them up so that when I attach them together, they're already going to stick together because the chocolate is already melted. I'm going to add my tablespoon of hot cocoa mix. If you don't have hot cocoa mix, you can actually make your own by taking 2 teaspoons of confectioner's sugar, 2 teaspoons of dry milk powder, and 1 teaspoon of cocoa powder. So now I'm going to close the bomb with the other half of the mold. I'm going to heat it up, and then I'm just going to match it to the sides of the other mold. And they should stick together pretty quickly. Now, I still want to cover up the seams in this one because, again, it's not perfect. And I think that if I would have taken a little bit more care, it would have been more perfect. So what I decided to do is I took another brush and I actually just painted the sides with the chocolate. Make sure the chocolate is not too hot because it will actually melt your mold really quickly. So I just painted gently and I dip it in any of the sprinkles. Again, you could put anything you want on the outside. You could put nuts, sprinkles, you can put coconut, whatever you like. Now I'm going to test my hot cocoa bomb. I'm going to take 8 to 10 ounces of milk, heat it up, and then I'm going to pour it right over my cocoa bomb. I want to make sure that it's not boiling. It's just coming up to a simmer, small little bubbles. Here comes the test. I'm going to pour it right over. Sorry for the steam. And get my spoon, stir it slightly, and I have instant success of a hot cocoa bomb. A little bit of work, but definitely worth it in the end because the taste is delicious. So for my 4 ounces of chocolate, I made 2 hot cocoa bombs. If you wanted to make more, you would just up the amount of chocolate. You can serve this with a little bit of whipped cream, homemade, or if you have like the Ready Whip in the can, it's just as good. Just make sure that you let it cool before you taste it. I hope you enjoyed my hot chocolate bomb recipe and that you may try it at home. It's not as hard as it looks and it is really delicious. Enjoy!